What if I told you that the life you have been living, the one that feels familiar and known, the one you wake up to each morning with its routines and rituals and quiet disappointments, is not the only life moving through you right now? What if there's another life, quieter, slower, less visible to the eyes, but more real to something deeper inside you? And this other life has been growing in the dark while you were busy attending to everything else. You might not have noticed it yet. Most people don't. Not because it is hidden or secret, but because we have been taught to look outward, to measure ourselves by what we produce, what we achieve, what we hold on to. And so we miss the most important movements of all, the ones that happen in the silence between thoughts, in the moment when you pause at a window and feel something you cannot name, in the sudden absence of a desire that once consumed you. There is a fading that happens in life that we are taught to fear. We are told that when something fades, it is lost. When passion dims, when relationships grow quieter, when the urgency that once drove us forward begins to soften, we interpret this as failure, as decline, as something gone wrong. We reach for it, trying to revive what was, trying to return to an intensity that no longer fits. But what if that fading is not loss at all? What if it is completion? What if some things are meant to fade not because they were mistakes, but because they have finished their work inside you? This is not a comfortable idea. It asks you to let go of the belief that more is always better, that holding on is always noble, that permanence is the measure of value. It asks you to trust something you cannot see yet, something that is not loud or insistent, something that moves like water beneath ice, slowly reshaping the landscape of who you are. You might feel in your body first, a kind of tiredness that is not about sleep, a heaviness that is not quite sadness. You sit down at the end of the day, and instead of feeling restless or driven, you feel still, not empty. Still, there's a difference. Emptiness aches, stillness breathes, and in that stillness, if you are quiet enough, you might notice that something you used to carry is no longer there. A worry that used to loop endlessly in your mind has simply stopped. A relationship that once demanded all your attention has become neutral, neither painful nor exciting, just complete. You do not hate it. You do not long for it. It has faded into the background of your life, and you realize with a kind of surprise that you are okay with that. More than okay. Relieved. This is not the relief of escape. It is the relief of arrival, of having walked a long road and finally reaching the place where the road ends. Not because you gave up, but because there is nowhere left to go in that direction. And standing there, at the end of that road, you do not feel lost. You feel finished. The word itself carries weight. Finished. We use it to describe failure, as in I am finished, meaning defeated. But there is another meaning, older and truer. Finished as in complete, as in whole, as in no longer needing to become anything other than what it already is. A painting is finished. A symphony is finished. A season is finished, not because it failed, but because it fulfilled itself. Carl Jung spent much of his life listening to the language of the unconscious, not as a foreign tongue to be translated into logic, but as a native language we have forgotten how to speak. He understood that the psyche does not move in straight lines. It does not progress the way we think progress should look. It spirals. It returns. It revisits the same themes again and again, each time from a deeper place, until finally something shifts and the theme is no longer necessary. He called this individuation, the process by which a person becomes who they truly are, not by adding more and more to themselves, but by shedding what was never truly theirs to begin with. The roles they played, the identities they borrowed, the desires they inherited, all of it fades, not because it was wrong, but because it was preparation. It was scaffolding. And when the structure is complete, the scaffolding comes down. Jung also spoke of synchronicity, the idea that meaningful coincidences are not random, but are expressions of a deeper order, a conversation between the inner world and the outer world. When something fades in your life, when a door closes or a path ends or a person drifts away, it is easy to see it as mere chance, as bad timing, as something that happened to you. But what if it is not happening to you at all? What if it is happening with you, through you as you? What if the fading is not an accident, but an alignment, a quiet agreement between who you were and who you are becoming, a recognition that this chapter, however beautiful or painful, is complete? In this video, I will share with you 7 inner shifts, 7 quiet signs that indicate something in your life is not falling apart, but coming together in a new way. These are not the loud, dramatic signs we are taught to look for. They are subtle. They are easy to miss. But once you recognize them, you may find yourself reinterpreting everything that has happened to you recently. What felt like loss may reveal itself as release. What felt like confusion may reveal itself as reorganization. What felt like silence may reveal itself as the deepest kind of communication, the kind that happens below words, in the body, in dreams, in the small choices you make without knowing why. I invite you to stay with me until the end, not because I have answers, but because together we can sit with these questions in a way that allows something new to emerge. The first sign is a strange one, and it often goes unnoticed because we interpret it as apathy or depression. It is the fading of urgency. You wake up one morning and realize that the thing you were chasing, the goal that consumed your thoughts, the achievement that seems so important, no longer pulls at you the way it once did. This is not because you have given up. It is not because you are lazy or unmotivated. It is because something inside you has finished its relationship with that desire. The desire was real. It served a purpose. It moved you forward, taught you something, shaped you. But now it is complete. And completion does not announce itself with fanfare. It arrives quietly, like the last page of a book you did not realize you were reading. You might notice this in small ways first. You stop checking your phone as often. You stop comparing yourself to others with the same intensity. You stop feeling the need to prove something, though you are not sure what you were trying to prove or to whom. There is a softening. You still have goals, still have things you care about, but they no longer feel like life or death. There is space around them. You can hold them lightly. And this lightness, this ease, can feel disorienting at first because we have been taught that passion must be intense, that commitment must be relentless, that if you are not burning with desire, you're doing something wrong. But what if the fire was never meant to burn forever? What if it was meant to burn just long enough to transform you? And now that the transformation is complete, the fire naturally subsides, leaving behind not ashes, but something solid, something real, something that does not need the heat anymore to hold its shape. Jung would say that this is the movement from the ego to the self, from a part of you that is always striving, always becoming, always trying to fill a void, to the part of you that already is. The self does not need to chase because it is not lacking. It does not need to prove because it is not in question. And when you begin to touch that place, even briefly, even in small moments, the urgency that once drove your life begins to fade. Not because you have lost your way, but because you have found it. The way is not out there, in the achievement, in the recognition, in the arrival at some distant goal. The way is here, in the quiet presence of this moment, in the simple fact of your existence, which does not need to be justified or earned or defended. You might resist this fading. You might try to reignite the fire, to force yourself to care as intensely as you once did. You might feel guilty, as if you were betraying some earlier version of yourself who worked so hard, who wanted so much. But guilt is just the ego's way of clinging to what is already gone. It is the mind's refusal to accept that change is natural, that completion is not failure, that you are allowed to be different now than you were then. And if you can sit with that guilt without acting on it, without trying to fix it or explain it away, you will notice something underneath it. A kind of peace, a kind of rightness, A sense that even though this fading feels strange and unfamiliar, it is exactly what is supposed to be happening. There is a second sign, closely related to the first but distinct in its texture. It is the fading of certain relationships, not through conflict or betrayal, but through a quiet, mutual drifting. You stop calling as often. They stop calling as often. The conversations, when they do happen, feel polite but distant, as if you are both speaking from opposite sides of a river that has slowly widened over time. And there is no anger, no resentment, no dramatic ending, just a gentle falling away, like leaves from a tree in autumn. This can be one of the most confusing experiences because we are taught that relationships should either thrive or explode, that if there is no fight, there is no reason for the distance. But sometimes distance is not a problem to be solved. Sometimes it is a recognition that the relationship has fulfilled its purpose, that you have given each other what you are meant to give, and now it is time to move on. Not because either of you is wrong, but because you are both changing in ways that no longer intersect. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, the shared reservoir of symbols and archetypes that connect all human beings. But he also understood that each person is on their own journey of individuation, their own path toward wholeness. And sometimes two people walk together for a while because their paths align, because they need each other, because they are working on the same inner material. But as they grow, as they integrate what they needed to integrate, their paths begin to diverge, not away from each other in a painful sense, but toward their own unique destinations. And the relationship, rather than clinging and contorting to stay alive, naturally fades. It becomes a memory, a chapter, something that was but is no longer, and that is okay. You might feel sadness about this. You might look back on old photos, old messages, and wonder what happened, wonder if you could have tried harder, been better, done something differently. But this kind of sadness is not the sadness of regret. It is the sadness of completion, the bittersweet recognition that something beautiful has ended not because it was broken, but because it was whole. And wholeness does not last forever. Wholeness is a moment, a phase, a cycle. It completes itself and then makes room for the next thing. If you can honor the relationship for what it was without trying to force it to be what it no longer is, you free both yourself and the other person to continue growing. You allow the fading to be what it is, a sign of respect, a sign of trust, a sign that you both know on some deep level that this is right. There is also the possibility that some relationships do not fade entirely, but transform. They become quieter, less frequent, but somehow deeper. You might not speak for months, but when you do, it is as if no time has passed. There is no need to catch up, no need to explain. You meet each other in a place beyond the surface, beyond the details of daily life, in a place that is always there, always available, because it is rooted not in circumstance, but in recognition. This kind of relationship has also completed something. It has moved beyond the need for constant contact, constant validation, constant presence. It has become something more like a touchstone, something you return to not out of habit, but out of genuine resonance. And this too is a kind of fading, a letting go of the form while keeping the essence. The third sign is the fading of old identities, the roles you once played with such conviction that you forgot they were roles at all. You were the responsible one, the creative one, the rebel, the caretaker, the perfectionist. These identities were not lies. They were real in their time. They helped you navigate the world, gave you a sense of who you were, provided a framework for your choices. But over time, without you fully realizing it, they begin to feel tight, like clothes that no longer fit. You catch yourself acting in ways that feel automatic, scripted, and instead of feeling secure, you feel trapped. You start to notice the gap between who you are pretending to be and who you actually are, and that gap creates a kind of discomfort, a friction that cannot be ignored. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to meet the expectations of the world, to fit into society, to protect the more vulnerable parts of ourselves. The persona is not bad. It is necessary, but it is not the self. And as you move deeper into your own individuation, as you begin to touch the parts of you that are not performing, not adapting, not trying to be anything other than what they are, the persona begins to fade. It does not disappear entirely. You still have roles to play, responsibilities to meet, ways of showing up in the world, but you hold them more lightly. You know they are roles. You know you're more than them. And this knowing creates space, a kind of inner freedom that allows you to move through life without being so rigidly attached to any one version of yourself. You might notice this when someone describes you in a way that used to feel accurate, but now feels incomplete. They say, "You are always so calm," or "You are always so driven." And instead of agreeing, you feel a quiet resistance, a sense that this description no longer captures the fullness of who you are. You are calm sometimes, you are driven sometimes, but you are also anxious, uncertain, playful, sad, curious, tired, alive in ways that cannot be reduced to a single trait. And as the old identities fade, as the persona loosens its grip, you begin to experience yourself as more fluid, more complex, more real. This can be destabilizing. It can feel like you're losing yourself, but you are not losing yourself. You are finding yourself beneath the layers of who you thought you had to be. There is often resistance to this fading, both from within and from others. People around you may feel confused or even threatened when you stop playing the role they expected. They may ask, "What happened to you?" Or, "Why are you acting so different?" And you may not have a clear answer because the change is not something you decided consciously. It is something that happened to you, or through you, as a natural consequence of growth. You cannot explain it in a way that satisfies them because it is not a logical process. It is a shedding, a dissolving, a quiet death of what was never fully alive. And on the other side of that death is not nothing. On the other side is presence, is authenticity, is the simple, undramatic experience of being who you are without apology or explanation. The fourth sign is the fading of the need to be understood. This is a subtle one, and it often masquerades as loneliness or isolation. You find yourself speaking less, explaining less, defending less. Not because you do not care what others think, but because you have stopped believing that being understood by others is the key to your own sense of validity. You used to spend so much energy trying to make people see you, trying to articulate your inner world in ways that would bridge the gap between you and them. And sometimes it worked. Sometimes they got it. But more often, they did not. And you felt the ache of that misunderstanding, the loneliness of being seen but not truly known. But now something has shifted. You realize that no one can fully understand you because no one lives inside your experience. They can come close. They can listen. They can witness. But the full texture of your inner life, with all its contradictions and nuances and private meanings, is yours alone. And instead of this realization making you feel more isolated, it makes you feel more free. You no longer need to translate yourself in a language that others can consume. You no longer need to perform your inner world for an audience. You can simply be with it, in it, as it, without the pressure to make it legible to anyone else. Jung understood this deeply. He wrote extensively about the loneliness of individuation, the way that as you move toward your own wholeness, you inevitably move away from the collective, from the shared assumptions and values that bind people together in a kind of unconscious agreement. This does not mean you become disconnected from others. It means you connect from a different place, a place that is not dependent on sameness or agreement or mutual understanding. You connect from presence, from the simple recognition that you are both here, both alive, both navigating the mystery of existence in your own way. And that is enough. You might notice this fading when you stop over-explaining yourself. Someone misunderstands your intentions. And instead of launching into a long clarification, you simply let it be. You trust that the truth of who you are will reveal itself over time, through your actions, through your presence, and that anyone who is meant to see you will see you without you having to force it. This is not indifference. It is trust. Trust in the process. Trust in the unfolding. Trust that you do not need to control how others perceive you in order to be okay. And this trust, this letting go of the need to be understood, creates a kind of spaciousness in your relationships. You are no longer performing. You are no longer managing. You are simply there, and that simplicity is its own kind of intimacy. The fifth sign is the fading of future-oriented thinking. You used to live so much of your life in the future, in the plans, the goals, the dreams of what would be. You told yourself that when you achieved this, when you reached that, when you finally arrived at some imagined destination, then you would be happy, then you would be complete, then your life would truly begin. But now, slowly, almost imperceptibly, that future has lost its grip on you. You still make plans. You still have things you're working toward, but they no longer feel like the point. The point is here, now, in the quiet morning light, in the taste of your coffee, in the feeling of your breath moving in and out of your body. The point is presence, and presence does not exist in the future. It only exists now. This fading can feel like a loss of ambition, a loss of drive. And if you interpret it that way, you might panic, might try to force yourself back into the future-oriented mindset that society rewards and celebrates. But if you can sit with it, if you can allow this fading without resisting it, you will discover something surprising. You will discover that presence is not passive. It is not resignation. It is the most alive state there is. When you are truly here, truly now, you are not disconnected from the future. You are connected to it in a deeper way, in a way that allows the future to unfold organically rather than being forced into being by sheer willpower. You are no longer trying to make your life happen. You are allowing it to happen. And in that allowing, there's a kind of grace, a kind of ease that was never available when you were constantly pushing, constantly striving, constantly living ahead of yourself. Jung spoke of the self as timeless, as existing outside the linear progression of past, present, and future. When you touch the self, when you move from the ego's constant planning and strategizing into the deeper ground of being, time changes. It becomes less of a line and more of a circle, less of a race and more of a rhythm. You stop measuring your life by how far you have come or how far you have left to go. You start experiencing it as a series of moments, each one complete in itself, each one containing everything you need. And in this shift, the future fades not into nothingness, but into potential, into possibility, into something that is always arriving but never fully here. And that is okay. That is how it is supposed to be. You might notice this when you stop asking yourself, where will I be in 5 years? And start asking, where am I right now? You might notice it when you stop feeling anxious about time running out and start feeling curious about what this moment is offering you. You might notice it in the way you listen to others, not waiting for your turn to speak, not planning your response, but actually hearing them, actually being with them, because you are not somewhere else in your mind. This is not a skill you learn. It is a fading of the habit of being elsewhere, and in that fading, presence naturally arises. The sixth sign is the fading of the need to fix yourself. You have spent so much of your life believing that you are a project, a work in progress, something that needs to be improved, optimized, healed, transformed. You have read the books, done the practices, gone to therapy, journaled, meditated, tried to become a better version of yourself. And all of that was valuable. All of that was part of the journey. But now, something is shifting. You are beginning to realize that you were never broken to begin with. You were always whole. The wounds were real. The pain was real. The struggles were real. But they were not evidence of your inadequacy. They were evidence of your humanity, of your aliveness, of your willingness to engage with life even when it hurt. This realization does not come all at once. It comes in waves, in small moments of self-acceptance that surprise you. You catch yourself in a mistake, and instead of spiraling into self-criticism, you simply notice it and move on. You feel an old pattern arising, and instead of judging yourself for not being healed yet, you meet it with curiosity, with compassion, with the understanding that patterns take time to shift and that you're doing the best you can. You stop treating yourself like a problem to be solved and start treating yourself like a person to be known, to be lived, to be experienced. And in this shift, the need to fix yourself begins to fade. Jung believed that the goal of individuation was not perfection but wholeness. And wholeness includes everything: the light and the shadow, the strengths and the weaknesses, the beauty and the mess. When you stop trying to eliminate the parts of yourself you do not like and start integrating them, start seeing them as part of the larger pattern of who you are, you stop being at war with yourself. You stop exhausting yourself with the endless project of self-improvement. You start living your life instead of constantly preparing to live it. And this is not complacency. This is not giving up. This is the deepest kind of growth, the kind that happens not by adding more, but by accepting what is already here. You might notice this fading when you stop consuming self-help content with the same urgency. You still learn, still grow, still seek wisdom, but it is no longer driven by the belief that you're not enough as you are. It is driven by curiosity, by the natural desire to understand yourself and the world more deeply. You might notice it when you stop comparing your healing journey to others, stop feeling behind or inadequate because you have not reached some imagined milestone. You might notice in the way you speak to yourself, the softening of your inner voice, the way it becomes less of a critic and more of a companion. The seventh sign, and perhaps the most profound, is the fading of the fear of death. Not death in the literal, physical sense, though that too may shift, but death as change, as ending, as the unknown. You used to cling so tightly to what was, to what you knew, to the structures and relationships and identities that made you feel safe. You resisted change because change felt like loss, felt like a small death, and you were not ready to die, not ready to let go, not ready to step into the uncertainty of what comes next. But now, slowly, that fear is fading. You are beginning to understand that death is not the opposite of life. It is part of life. It is the mechanism by which life renews itself, transforms itself, makes space for the new. Every ending is also a beginning. Every loss is also a release. Every fading is also a completion. And when you can hold this paradox, when you can sit with the discomfort of not knowing what comes next without rushing to fill the void, you discover a kind of courage you did not know you had. Not the courage of the hero who charges in a battle, but the courage of the person who stands still in the face of uncertainty and says, I do not know what happens next, and that is okay. I trust the process. I trust the unfolding. I trust that whatever is fading is making room for something I cannot yet see. Jung wrote about the process of psychological death and rebirth, the way that in order to become who we truly are, we must allow the old self to die. This is not a metaphor. It is an actual experience, a felt sense of something ending, something dissolving, something that was once solid becoming fluid and then reforming into a new shape. And this process is terrifying if you resist it, if you cling to the old form, if you try to keep alive what is already dying. But if you can surrender to it, if you can allow the death to happen without fighting it, you will find that what emerges on the other side is not less than what you were. It is more. It is truer. It is closer to the essence of who you have always been beneath all the layers of conditioning and fear and adaptation. You might notice this fading when you stop panicking at the first sign of change. A job ends, a relationship ends, a phase of life ends, and instead of immediately scrambling to replace it, to fill the void, to return to the familiar, you pause. You breathe. You allow yourself to be in the in-between space, the liminal space, the space where nothing is certain and everything is possible. You might notice it in your dreams, which become more vivid, more symbolic, more populated with images of death and rebirth, of descending into darkness and emerging into light. You might notice it in your body, which begins to relax in ways it never has before, as if some deep, ancient tension is finally releasing, some survival mechanism that you no longer need. And so, as we come to the end of this exploration, I want to return to where we began. Not everything that fades is lost. Some things are complete. The urgency that fades is not apathy. It is arrival. The relationships that fade are not failures. They are fulfillments. The identities that fade are not losses. They are liberations. The need to be understood that fades is not isolation. It is freedom. The future-oriented thinking that fades is not aimlessness. It is presence. The need to fix yourself that fades is not complacency. It is wholeness. The fear of death that fades is not recklessness. It is trust. All of these fadings, all of these quiet endings, are signs that you're moving deeper into your own life, deeper into your own truth, deeper into the person you were always meant to become. This process does not happen all at once. It is not linear. It is not neat. You will have days when the old urgency returns, when the old identities reassert themselves, when a fear of death grips you again. And that is okay. That is part of the process. You are not failing. You are spiraling, returning to the same themes from a deeper place, integrating what needs to be integrated, releasing what needs to be released. And if you can meet each return with compassion, with curiosity, with the understanding that this is how growth actually happens, you will find that the fadings become easier, the completions more recognizable, the trust more solid. There is a practice you can do if you feel called to it. It is very simple. At the end of each day, sit quietly for a few minutes and ask yourself, what faded today? Not what went wrong, not what you lost, but what faded. What urgency softened? What identity loosened? What fear released? And then, without judgment, without trying to fix or change anything, simply notice, simply witness, simply allow the fading to be what it is, a natural part of the process, a sign that something is complete. You might write about it if that feels helpful. You might just sit within silence. The practice is not about doing anything with the information. It is about recognizing it, honoring it, allowing it to be seen. Another practice, equally simple, is to notice the space that fading creates. When something fades, it leaves space. And that space is not empty. It is full of potential, full of possibility, full of whatever wants to emerge next. You do not need to fill it immediately. You do not need to know what comes next. You can simply be with the space, breathe into it, allow it to be there without rushing to collapse it back into the familiar. This is where the new life grows, in the space between what was and what will be, in the fertile darkness where seeds are planted and roots take hold. And finally, I want to invite you to trust the process. Trust that nothing is random. Trust that the fadings in your life are not mistakes, but are part of a larger pattern, a deeper intelligence that is always at work, always guiding you toward wholeness, even when it does not feel like it, even when it looks like loss, even when you cannot see the shape of what is emerging. You are not alone in this. Every person who has ever lived has walked this path, has experienced these fadings, has stood in the space between who they were and who they are becoming. And every person who has trusted the process, who has allowed the completions to be complete, has discovered that on the other side of the fading is not nothing. On the other side is life, more real, more true, more alive than anything they knew before. If this exploration resonated with you, if you recognize something of your own experience in these words, I invite you to like this video, to subscribe to the channel, to leave a comment sharing what faded for you recently and what you are discovering in the space it left behind. Your reflections are not just for you. They are part of the larger conversation, the collective process of waking up to the truth of who we are beneath all the layers, all the roles, all the fears. And in sharing, you help others recognize their own process, their own fadings, their own completions. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for trusting this slow, quiet unfolding. Until next time, be gentle with yourself. Be present. And remember, not everything that fades is lost. Some things are simply complete.